Hello friends, I am Chevee. Welcome to my shed. How are you doing today? How's life in your world? You know, I realize I generally take a drink after that question. I always wonder if anybody actually answers out loud. I do sometimes when I'm watching videos. Quick heads up. Today's video is about programming, and so I'm going to say probably a lot of things that confuse the hell out of you if you're not a programmer. And I apologize for that up front, but that doesn't mean go away and don't watch this video, because what I'm saying is universally applied to kind of anything that you do, in theory, in my theory. Recently, I posted, I stated an opinion on a programming forum, and I stated it as if it was fact. And that is always like the opening the floodgates. You'll get a ton of people who say you're absolutely right. You'll get 1,000 more who say you're an idiot, right? And the simple statement that I made was, the discussion was about the simplicity of your software. The simplicity is way more important than being clever. And by that I mean people who write on programming forums are not typically programmers. That's a really rough thing for me to say, and that's like a huge broad stroke. But they're not. What I mean by that is people who post these like these super awesome, look at this code that I wrote that does all this magic, and it's this kind of clever weirdness that is not readable unless you have a tutorial. That's not real code. That's not what actually gets work done in the real world. And so the idea is that simplicity is way more important. Readability is way more important. If I write a book, I'm gonna, and I want anybody to be able to read it, I'm gonna write it to, first grade level. And my opinion is that you can be all the clever that you want to be, but you're not helping the next person who's reading your work, right? So this discussion kind of started about the way that some constructs in programming can be really clever and really readable at the same time. So we have a thing called ternaries in some languages. Not all languages have them. A ternary is essentially like you ask a question. So does this exist? If it does, do this. If it doesn't, do this. That's it. That's an entire ternary. It's on one line of code. You don't have to put it's not an if then else blah blah blah. It's just does this exist? If so, do this, or if not, do this, and that's it. And a person posted, yes, this is great because you can do, does this exist? If yes, then does this exist? And if no, do this. But if no to the bigger thing, do this. And it's like, look how awesome that is. And my response was, this is never okay. Like, never do this. It is completely confusing to the next person. And, like, very quickly. And I'll post a link to this topic. I'll post it in the notes below. So if you're a programmer and you want to read the topic, it was on Hacker News. I'll post a link. Essentially, I stated this opinion. The opinion is you should never, ever, 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 ever nest ternaries. A programming, an if statement, if this exists, do this, is a super common construct in programming. And lots of times, even in my own code, you will see code that says, if this exists, do this. And inside of this, I say, does this exist? If so, do this. And then inside of that, I might say, what about that? And so it's a way to, like narrow down your options and to kind of have lots of branching pathways. But doing it on one line is really bad, in my opinion. But I stated it as fact. And so the point is that I made a couple of, I responded to a few of these comments. There's a lot of comments. And I basically said, being clever is great and all, but we're not writing code for ourselves. We already know how to read our own code. We're writing code for the next guy. And that next guy doesn't have time to sit down and go through your code like it's a book and read it line for line. He's just going to go fix a bug, or he's going to add a new feature, and all he's looking for is his insertion point to fix whatever it is or to add whatever it is, and then he's gone. And sitting there and trying to figure out how your code works should never be part of his job. That's not his job. His job is to jump in, fix or insert, and leave. The rest of your code is, who cares? Who cares what it does? It doesn't matter. So I write for that guy. Until this all comes around to, this week has been, man, a history lesson for me. I got my start with my current company because I had I wrote some software for my previous company to help some clients, and I brought that software with me. And at that time, I was still not sold on any particular framework, which is kind of Legos. Imagine website, you know, when you see a website, Legos, building that website, and you say, all right, I want this form here and this thing here, and click, 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 click. And I had decided that it was better for me to write all of that myself, and I did. And at that time, it was I was still stuck on this idea of every unit, everything on that site should be its own individual thing, and we can style that individual thing however we want. And because of that, I went back today, or this week. A customer asked me to add a little feature, just a tiny little thing, and I went to add it, and I could not figure out how to get it to look like the rest of the page. Like, I spent a lot of time digging through my CSS, trying to find all the references, all the links, all the classes, all of that stuff for different screen sizes, all of this. I mean, it was a mess, and it sucked. And I was that next guy. I wrote code for Chevee 3 years ago, and Chevee 3 years later is that next guy trying to fix it, and it was just bad. So I've spent the week trying to port my software over to Bootstrap, which is what Twitter is built on. That's their framework, their Legos. And it's been, I know Bootstrap very well, so it's been going okay, but it's been, while I'm going through it, I'm looking at old code and just, you know, I'm a victim of my own crimes, I guess. You know, when I said don't do this, and I look at my code and I did very similar things that I would not do now, ever in a million years would I do it now, because it's confusing. I'm finding all sorts of stuff. Hopefully, if I remember, I've shown you some images on the screen of what it used to look like versus what it looks like now. It's getting better. We'll get there. But that's all I have for you today. Sunday is Mother's Day, so if you're a mother, happy Mother's Day. If you aren't a mother but you have a mother, tell her happy Mother's Day. Even if you've never talked to her in the last 20 years, reach out and just say, Mom, thank you. That's all you have to say. Be good. Be a good kid. Thank you for being here as always. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, being amazing friends and wonderful people. I appreciate you, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Hey, Doc, wait! I want to ask you something.
Taser fact comes from theguardian.com. What does the MI in MI5 stand for? MI5 and MI6 were the original designations when both organizations came under the War Office, now the MOD. MI stands for Military Intelligence. Their official names acquired in the 30s are the Security Service, that's MI5, and Secret Intelligence Service, or MI6.